everybody, and welcome back to Black Tea. This is the podcast video series all about Black women in advertising, presented by Mute by Cleo. As usual, I am your host, Michelle Lawrence, and I'm happy to welcome today our guest, Melanie Piard. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. Please tell people what you do and where you're based.
I am based in Montreal. I am a brand director for a company called CookIt. So my career path has been mostly in advertising. And in the last 4 years, I made a switch to the client side, or the brand side, if you want to call it, where I've been playing the role of brand strategist, but also creative strategist.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of hats to wear. Take us through your advertising journey career-wise and how you got to where you are now.
So I started as a graphic designer. I majored in graphic design at university, and then throughout my career, I've been an art director, moved on to associate creative director and creative director. I've worked in many different types of ad agencies. Some were traditional ad agencies, digital. I've even worked at Cirque du Soleil for some time, about a year.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, really cool. So I've had the chance to work in different types of agencies. I've worked in experiential marketing, also an agency that only specialized in experiential. And then my last agency experience was at Ogilvy, where I worked in pharma for about 3 years. And then at some point, I felt like I wanted to have a little bit more understanding on the decisions that were being made for a brand. Because when you're on the agency side, you get a brief. Yeah. So your implication in the brand is very superficial. It's very light. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to understand, the machine behind the brand. So I made the jump to the client side, where I got the chance really to see firsthand, like working with salespeople, product people, it's different type of expertise, and then how they make decisions that impact the brand.
Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful. And that's a great breakdown of where you've been and where you are now. I think it's a great reason to move brand side. It's nice to have another creative on the show. I always love when a creative comes on here, let alone an art director. So it kind of it gasses me up. Maybe we can talk about some more visual stuff that moves you. So I would love to talk about a little bit about branding, since I know that's kind of like, the bag that you're in right now. How do you feel like brands should move in order to stay relevant throughout cultural shifts? Things are always changing. Things are changing. What's cool, what's acceptable, what is and isn't a trend. How do you think brands should move to stay relevant through those moments?
I think the first thing about brand is really understanding your audience. I think often we make the mistake of assuming things about a market. But first, understand your audience, understand the different categories of people that are part of this audience, right? The different communities, the different groups. And then when you look at culture, see how culture influences those people. Mm-hmm. And see how they navigate through, social shifts. All these things that we see in the news, understanding what's happening in the world, and how the specific group that you're targeting is impacted by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the simplest answer for that question. It's a little bit more complex than that, but firsthand is really understanding the consumer.
Yeah. So basically, do your research, do your homework, stay in touch. Okay. Yeah.
In touch, yeah. And then depending on who you're talking to. So I've had the chance to work in music before my experience at CookIt, and you have to be on the trends. What's happening in music? What's happening on TikTok? TikTok is big, in the music space. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's not just understand your audience, but also you have to be aware and you have to be curious on what's happening in our society as well.
Yeah. Speaking of which, do you feel like your background as an art director, as a creative on the agency side, makes you a different kind of client now on the brand side?
Absolutely. I think it's funny because on the market, I have this unique profile where, people are like, well, are you a strategist or are you a creative? Right. I have to choose, right? Because on the agency side, there's like a very defined line between the two expertise. And I find myself where I do both. So what it did for me, what I noticed is that because of my knowledge in strategy, I'm a stronger creative, and vice versa, right? Because I know what it takes to have impactful creative, because I understand how it works, the ideation process, etc.
Yeah.
When I am working on a strategy, I can see further. I can see really far how that could live, how this strategy will articulate itself, how the brand can express itself visually through words, through messaging. So I think it's a win-win situation for me. And I think that's why on the brand side, people kind of, they like this type of profiles because you can do both.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing. I think magic happens when strategy and creative collaborate and stay close, and that makes sense to me. So you're kind of like an embodiment of that. I'm wondering if you feel more empathetic toward agencies that you now partner with from the brand side, having been in their shoes, or do you find that you have a higher standard for them than maybe you would if you hadn't worked in an agency setting?
That's an excellent question. So I haven't had the chance to work with an agency yet. I've worked with production companies.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback that I got was that it's very clear what you want.
Mm-hmm.
When I show up and I give them a brief, they're like, okay, that is like super clear what you want, because I know how they work. I know what a good brief should look like. I know what a brief that I would like to receive should look like. So I think that's the feedback that I got, really. And then also when giving feedback to the work, because I understand the process that they go through, the feedback is actually more pertinent. It's like, oh, okay, the feedback is really specific because you understand why we made that decision or why we made that choice. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. That sounds great. All right, so I know that you highly value mentorship, specifically for folks that are in underrepresented communities. I'm curious, like, what is the importance of that mentorship for underrepresented talent, and then what has it meant for you in your career?
So, okay, I never had a mentor.
Yeah.
Ever, right? So I'm like this older generation that didn't get a chance to have a mentor in that space. My first, if you want, my first contact with advertising was through a movie in '93. It was Boomerang with Eddie Murphy, Halle Berry, and Robin Givens. Do you know that movie?
Yep.
Okay, so that was my first contact with. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be Halle Berry at the end of that movie where she was like associate creative. No, she was executive creative director. I was like, I can do that. That I want to do. So I had this really biased perception of like, oh, this is a very inclusive and diverse, space. And I grew up in Haiti. So I grew up in a Black country. So coming back to Canada, because I was born in Canada. And then when I was 5, my parents moved to Haiti. So when I got back here to go to university, it was a shock to me because even in school, I was the only Black girl for the whole 3 years of my bachelor degree. We were two. It was me and this other guy from Tunisia. And then going into the workforce, it was the same thing. I was not represented. And then there was no mentorship, right? Because I think people didn't necessarily know how to mentor me because they didn't understand the struggles that I was going through, right? So to me today, what's important about mentoring is really creating a safe space. What I noticed for myself is that failure was a blocker for me. The fear of failure, right? Because failure is a privilege.
Yeah.
It's not everyone is allowed to fail. And I think
I hear that a lot too from immigrant women or children of immigrant. I hear that a lot. And I feel that even my parents are not immigrants, but just even being from a Black American family, the bar is high because of the sacrifices made for you to have opportunities. So it's like you're expected to be on point all the time.
Exactly. So, you walk into the workforce with this mindset. Like you cannot fail, because if you fail for the whole community,
Yeah.
right? So I find like working with underrepresented talents, I find that this element of fear of failure is very common, is almost a common denominator. It creates imposter syndrome. People get really defensive also when you give feedback, like negative feedback. So I really try to create a safe space, and I make the people that I work with, I make them comfortable also with failure, because I always push. I like to push. I like, hey, think outside of the box, take risks, manage your risk, but I want you to take risk. I don't want you to be safe. And then also be open to the feedback. Understand that the feedback is for you to get better, to develop your skills, and to make the work actually better. So I think if you approach things, if you approach the work like that, they'll be more receptive to constructive feedback, and also they are not afraid to innovate, to be more creative.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
requires failure. I think that's the thing, that it's like a retraining of the brain we have to do, because you have to fail in order to be creative. You won't find the limits unless you test them, you push them, you cross them.
That's it. Like there's so many, examples that I have of that. I remember working with this copywriter, and then I was pushing. I was like, no, more. Like, I want you to really think outside of the box. And the person went like really far off, completely rogue. And I was like, okay, you really went rogue. Let's reel you back in. But then after that, we had the best ideas ever.
Yeah.
Because the person was able to go this far and come back and analyze, everything that was put on the table. We were able to come up with something amazing. So, yeah.
Pulling someone back is a lot easier than pushing them to go farther. So yeah, that's a really good note. So you're a creative soul, even outside of work. I know that you're really into painting, into drawing, into cooking. What inspires you in those arenas? What types of subjects do you like to get into when you're drawing and painting? Do you even have time to get into those things still? Talk a little bit about that.
Wish I had more time.
Always.
I definitely wish I had more time. But I've been drawing a lot of Black faces. I think that's the thing that I've been exploring a lot.
Okay.
African patterns. But I really enjoy cooking. Cooking to me is like, it's like meditation. I like to play around with spices, play around with like different style of cooking, roasting, barbecuing, etc. So yeah.
Do you focus mostly on Haitian food, or are you someone who likes to taste a lot of different things?
Oh, I taste a lot of different things. Cook a lot with like, I don't know, Mediterranean spices, Indian spices, Asian spices. I sometimes even mix them, which is probably not allowed, but I do it. I mean, it tastes really good. But yeah.
Okay, getting back to your career. So you have had a lot of experience. You've worked in a lot of different avenues. I'm curious if there's a career goal that you have set for yourself that you've achieved.
I decided when I was 30 that I would not be doing this at 40. I was like, I do not want to be in this industry at 40 years old. And then here I am, 44. This is what I'm doing. But it's different. I think I didn't like the creative side, in agency. And I didn't see myself doing this, forever. I didn't see myself being a creative director with all the pressure that comes with it. I didn't see myself doing that. So I even tried to venture into like, I was trying to open a restaurant business. I really tried different things. I got into real estate. I was like, I'm not doing this when I'm 40. I think what happened in the last 5 years for me, I discovered brand. I discovered brand strategy and brand development. And to me, that kind of like, it lit a fire, in me. It's like, oh my God, I love having control over a brand narrative. I like crafting compelling stories. I like understanding my audience. I like doing research, qualitative data. I like telling the story behind quantitative data. It's all these new things that I was not exposed to at the beginning of my career. Just give me a completely different perspective on advertising.
Yeah.
So in terms of career goals, I think I'm living it right now.
I love that. I love to hear that. And it's still very much connected to, you know, the visual side of things. Is still very much connected to advertising and branding, but from a more comfortable place, I feel, from a deeper place where you can really take a dive and focus in and have, like you said, that control, but also that deeper understanding of the brand that you're working for. So that's beautiful. I love to hear that. All right. I really just have one more question that I love to ask everybody who comes on. And that is, are there any Black-owned companies or products that you're really loving right now?
I was in like a hair care line,
Yeah.
Melanie Care.
Okay.
The girl is called Whitney. She used to be this YouTube, black hair influencer. She was giving tips on like how to make, your DIY,
Wow.
hair products. And then now she has her own line. It's been like 3 years now. I really love her line of product.
Okay. That's amazing. I hadn't heard that one. I love it. I'm just racking up recommendations for myself every time I ask that question, really. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to hear your story and just to catch up with you. And I appreciate you coming on to share your story on Black Tea.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It was really nice talking to you, and success. I wish you success.
Oh, thank you. I take that. I'll receive that. Everybody out there watching Black Tea today, we thank you and we wish you success too. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please check out all the other episodes at musebycleo.com/Black Tea and make sure you're following us on Instagram at @SipBlackTea. Thank you so much, and that'll do it for today. Bye.
Hey.